What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Toma Todito Boxing Show. And listen, this is a special episode for me. One, we're doing a preview, a look into and a quick review of what's going to happen this coming Saturday between Charlo, Jermell Charlo, and Brian Castano. This is a rematch of their fight that took place last July, and a fight that ended up with a lot of controversy. A lot of controversy due to the fact that it was called a draw, and a lot of people saw it for Brian Castano. Some people saw it for Jermell Charlo. Nonetheless, here we go. It deems a rematch, and we are here. Both parties are heated, and it's been the anticipation, the build-up, the craziness behind the fight, the craziness that has surrounded what took place in the first event, and the reason for the fight moving away from Houston or away from the Texas state to California over to the questions of the judging and everything that's taking place or that could potentially take place this coming Saturday by way of favoritism. That is something that we want to touch into today. And with that said, not only do I want to do a quick preview of Charlo Castano, but Charlo Castano 2 or the rematch, but I also gotta let you know that I got a special guest here today. And yes, not an actor or a movie star or a music star, anybody that you will recognize, but this is none other than my little brother, Joe, who's going to be jumping in on this with me. Very knowledgeable in the sport as well, very analytical as far as the sport is concerned, and it's a different type of pace, different type of rhythm as far as the typical episodes that you're accustomed to hearing from me. So with that said, let's get the episode underway. And of course, please don't forget to subscribe, continue downloading, and continue spreading the word. The show's growing, and the show's growing at an exponential rate, and I appreciate it, and I owe it all to you guys. Let's get into it. Let's talk about Charlo and Castano 2. Joe, welcome to the show. Welcome to the podcast, to the Toma Todito Boxing Show. And I know this is your first bit of exposure to the podcast world, but nothing to be nervous about. Let's talk about what we love and what we know, and that is the sport of boxing. How you doing, Joe?
Good. Just excited to talk about the sweet science.
Perfect. What did you think about the first fight? We looked at the first fight. We scored the first fight. What was your analysis regarding the first fight? How did you score the first fight?
So, I guess cards on the table. The first fight, I scored 115-113 for Castano. I guess I'm not opposed to a draw scoring. I'm not opposed to a fight being called a draw, but I most definitely think that the justice to the fighters and to all parties involved is to declare a winner.
A clear and decisive winner?
Yes. Too much work, too much training, too much time is involved in each fight, in each training camp, in each person's, in just the blood, sweat, and tears that each party puts into it to call a fight a draw. Not that it is impossible or that a fight should not be called a draw.
So something that we were talking about earlier is that a lot of judges, and pretty much most judges, are afraid to even acknowledge a tie when it comes to a round. Why do you think that is? Why is it that everybody has to be so decisive to awarding one fighter over the other, even if it's questionable punches or it comes to questionable combinations where a fighter may be pitter-pattering and throwing 5 punches and only one of those may have landed? Why do you think judges hesitate in calling a draw to a specific round, because if there's ever any evidence of any fight needing certain rounds to be called a tie or a draw, this fight definitely deemed it. There was several rounds that were questionable in this fight.
This particular fight, I think, is a really big example of that, because I personally went through, rewatched the fight, and I scored it, and I wrote down notes, did the whole 9 yards, and there's several rounds where I actually start each round and noted a round that might be too close to call. A round that might be, in this fight in particular, right? Charlo Castano won. Several rounds where Charlo starts the round off more assertive, and Castano, due to the style of fighting, finishes the round more aggressive, throwing more flurries. Whether the flurries from either Charlo or Castano were effective is something that needs to be looked at. And whether one person won the majority of the round and a flurry of the other person to end the round would say sway a judge to score that round 10-9. I think that has to do a lot. There's a lot of intricacies that go into it. I think there is a round specifically that I think Charlo won 80 to 90% of the round, but Castano, if I were to score it, took the points on the round. And if you were to look at the judges scoring on the rounds, at least 2 judges gave Castano the round also.
How so? Because if you listen to what you're saying that Charlo won 90% of the round, which gives him a majority, a substantial majority over a 10% Castano attack. How do you think that Castano would be able to overcome that 90%, and based on what?
So this round in particular is round 3. Round 3, I think Charlo did. For 90% of the round, Charlo was on top.
So we're talking about over 2 minutes that Charlo controlled, because it's a 3-minute round. Over 2 minutes, you feel that Charlo controlled round 3, and then what happened?
Castano had, as he did for the majority of this fight, Castano started off slow and ended strong to win the rounds that I thought he won, with flurries that were exciting, that were aggressive, that were assertive. And I think for a judge...
Were those flurries connecting? Were they clearly connecting?
Again, this is Monday morning quarterbacking things, right? When you rewatch a fight and you're seeing the slow motion replays, you're not seeing what a judge is seeing. Ringside. A judge ringside does not have, as far as I know, they don't have that ability to see, the slow motion replay, the commentators, hearing what the commentators are saying. And I will say, I watched this fight back again, and I watched it with no sound to eliminate some of that bias that the commentators give each round as to who they think is winning. But I think it's very subjective, because there is a school of thought, I think, of, do you win the fight or do you win the boxing match? Charlo, I thought, was the better boxer in the fight. He was keeping his range. He was using his long jab. He was trying to split the guard, and he did so successfully many times throughout the fight. He was landing the stronger, more effective punches that definitely caught the eye. But Castano was using volume. He was being more assertive, more aggressive. He had Charlo on the ropes a lot, which has been something that Charlo has struggled with before. to keep himself off the ropes and maybe not, give away rounds.
Which is something that we saw when he faced Tony Harrison. Tony Harrison had him on the ropes, and it was something that caused him trouble.
Yes. And that might be, I don't know if, whether to say it is, if I were watching the fight as a spectator as I would say Charlo was looking to land either counter punches or that one clean power punch to really make a definitive win of the round. Whereas Castano was more interested in getting inside, getting in the pocket, throwing volume, making the fight, a phone booth type fight. So what does one judge over another judge value more? What does a spectator over another spectator or a fan value more? Do you think clean boxer punchers, or do you think aggressive brawlers? Because that's what the fight broke down to.
So that's a really good point, because we see that time and time again, we notice that judges tend to score fights differently. And we tend to get used to certain judges being assigned to big name fights, and we start having our biases or our opinions about how they're going to see the fight based on their prior trajectory, right? Some judges get very impressed by output, some judges get very impressed by defense, and some judges get very impressed by just mere action, which action doesn't always translate to connectivity. It doesn't always translate to effectivity or efficacy or accuracy. And certain judges are impressed just like fans. Yet, they are big name judges, well-recognized names that have been around the sport for many, many years, that have grown to be respected throughout the years, yet they have questionable judging or scorings throughout these last few years. And it's something that in the past few episodes, and you guys could go back and keep me humble and look at the catalog and know how many times I criticize the judging that occurs throughout these fights. We get past round 3. What caught your eye after round 3?
I think after round 3, the fight really did settle into a rhythm. The rhythm being, not to say every round was a rhythm, but I think the fighters kind of established their distance. They established their, as in every fight, the fighter has to establish their distance, their comfort zone. They start to loosen up. They start to know their opponent a little bit more. After round 3, I feel like it kind of fell into a chess match where Castano is trying to back up Charlo, trying to be aggressive, trying to walk him down, and Charlo is using his boxing acumen to try to keep a distance, try to use that jab, keep him on the outside, look for those counter shots or those openings to land a clean punch. And it was very difficult to score some of these rounds. And I mean, cards on the table, I'll say for sure, 4 of these rounds I actually asterisked as, too close to call. They were rounds that I do not know what a official judge or what I think would win the fight or win the round, I should say. And they were rounds that I thought could have gone for either fighter, and I could see fairly going either way. So I do believe that both fighters were very much trying to implement their individual game plan, right? Charlo's trying to be the boxer puncher, trying to keep Castano on the outside using his reach, his speed, his movement, his lateral movement. He definitely picked up his lateral movement instead of just going onto the ropes. I think that his coach gave him good advice in the corner, saying, "Hey, you need to stop, waiting. You need to stop being on the ropes. You need to stop giving this guy rounds." And
this is Charlo.
Yes, Charlo.
So you're talking about Derek James.
Yes, Charlo.
Well-recognized coach.
Charlo responded well to his coach's advice. You're giving up rounds. Stop giving up rounds. And I think that Derek James recognized these issues, addressed them properly. Charlo, also as a great boxer, as a good student, understood these what his coach is telling him, and put his advice into action. More lateral movement, less time on the ropes, and each fighter was trying to implement their game plan, and I feel like at times those game plans might have been a draw, let's say.
What do you feel, based on what you're saying, what do you feel Charlo's game plan was? Based on how many rounds you saw and what he was trying to do, what do you think Charlo's game plan was against Castano, knowing very little against the Argentinian fighter, Brian Castano? We knew Brian Castano had a decorated past in the amateurs, in the Pan Am Games. In fact, he ended up beating Charlo's stablemate, Errol Spence, in the Pan Am Games. So in the amateurs, a Brian Castano who beats an Errol Spence, who is at the top of the welterweight division now, what do you feel that Charlo's plan was, and how was he executing it up to the round that you were just talking about?
Well, I definitely think there's a big separation, right, from amateurs to professional boxing.
Agree.
There is a different, and not to say that I've ever been an amateur or professional boxer, but just from being a fan of the sport, I think where in an amateur fight, points is the name of the game.
In your own right, and out of respect to you, you've participated in the sport, you've practiced the sport, you're involved in the sport, and you've boxed in your day. So there's knowledge that comes with being involved and lacing up the gloves.
I appreciate that. Definitely. I appreciate the generous praise there. But I think in the amateurs, points is the name of the game. Whereas in the pros, you get into the realm of excitement, you get into the realm of crowd draw, you get into the realm of, I don't know how to describe it, explosiveness. Like, people want to see explosive, dynamite fighters. If you think of the greats, you think of, Tyson. You think of these explosive fighters or finishers, or fighters that excelled in their craft. Mayweather, the best defensive boxer, arguably, of our time. Julio Cesar Chavez Sr., again, great Mexican fighter.
I like how you add senior.
Yes, senior.
We gotta be specific.
Caveat senior, please. Yes. Great defensive boxer. Amazing record.
So now you're getting into a different point, right? In which the effect of the crowd and the acknowledgement of the crowd and how it affects the flow of the fight. Because we know, and it's been proven time and again, that throughout Oscar de la Hoya's career, he was well known for stealing the rounds whenever they pattered that 10 seconds left, and it was like, and he woke up. 10 seconds left, and he would throw punches and punches and try to catch people off guard, often landing very well, very clean, and he would steal rounds that were often close, and he managed to do that. So you're telling me the effect of the crowd also plays into the scoring of this, or are we just basically going on what the judges were seeing? Because all three judges seem to be, in my opinion, from past fights, they score fights completely different.
Well, yes.
Yeah, and they look for completely different things. Yet, look at the scores of this fight. And it should have gone, in my opinion, to Brian Castano. In your opinion, you had a 115-113 to Brian Castano. I had a 115-113 to Brian Castano. And we'll post a scorecard on our Instagram page as I post the link to this episode and the post to this episode. You'll see the scorecard as I had it last year leading up to this fight, and this is going to be the preview episode. I had it 115-113. Here you are scoring at 115-113, exactly how I scored it. We may or may not have similar rounds, or I'm sure we have different rounds that we scored for each fighter, but the end result was that we saw one fighter as the winner, yet they called it a draw. What were these judges looking for?
Well, obviously, one of the judges here had a very, well, I don't know if it's very skewed, but there was a skewed scorecard relative to the other two official judging and the unofficial judging scorecards off of Showbox. And the funny
Showbox is pushing who? Showbox is pushing Charlo, right? So that's the reason why I traditionally don't acknowledge the unofficial scorecards, because in essence, ours are unofficial scorecards, right?
Yes, no, obviously, yes. Everything is unofficial unless you are an official judge. But one of the official judges did have a scorecard, which was skewed. And I don't know if we can pull it up or not, It was a skewed scorecard, which, funnily enough, when I reviewed the scorecards, the one judge, if I remember correctly, gave Castano the only rounds that the other judges did not give to Castano. So it seemed very opposite. I don't know what the judge was looking for.
So I'll call you the scores as they were reported. So let's look at this guy. Steve Weisfeld scored it 114-113 for Brian Castano. Nelson Vasquez scored it 117-111 for Charlo. That's a 6-point difference.
Yeah.
Tim Cheatham scored it 114-114.
Yeah.
A draw. So Nelson Vasquez sees round 1, round 2, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, 11, and 12 for Charlo. Something that, just looking at the other judges, Steve Weisfeld didn't see round 1 the same way. Didn't see round 4 the same way. Didn't see round 6 the same way. Round 8 the same way. And neither did Tim Cheatham. So Nelson Vasquez saw a one-sided fight for Charlo, while the other judges had it a lot closer, which is, I'm not opposed to Tim Cheatham's calling it a draw, because it was that close of a fight. And and based on what you're saying initially, that there were some rounds that were swing rounds, right? Because they were so hard to score. And it was leaving it to the point of, what is the judge looking for? Those are swing rounds. Tim Cheatham saw the swing rounds, called it a draw. Steve Weisfeld was more decisive, saw it Castano over Charlo. How the hell does one judge see it 6 points over another fighter? What fight was he watching?
I agree. And I'll say for sure, the surprise to me is I gave rounds 9, 10, 11, and 12 to Charlo. And I asterisked rounds 9 and 11 as being close. And those were the rounds that I believe that judge gave to Castano. Right?
And,
9, 10,
and in my
11,
opinion,
and 12.
we talked about this earlier, I gave the last 3 rounds to Charlo. 10, 11, 12, not round 9. I thought Castano won round 9. Now, that's how close this fight was. And that's what's building the intrigue to this coming Saturday. We're less than 24 hours away. This rematch is going to happen. All the titles are on the line. And we're bound to have an undisputed champion this Saturday at the 154-pound division, something that has never happened in the history of the sport. De La Hoya couldn't do it. Vargas couldn't do it. Vernon Forrest couldn't do it. Mayweather couldn't do it. Pacquiao couldn't do it because he only won once against Margarito. I don't even recall if that was the title fight. But you got all the big names that we keep... Canelo couldn't do it when he started there. All the big names that we keep mentioning, this hasn't happened. And one of the 2 twins, including Jermell, who's the older twin who campaigns at 160, won the title at 154, decided to move up to not compete against his brother. This is something special that we're about to see on Saturday. So we're about to see an undisputed fight for not just the lineal, but all 4 sanctioning body titles, plus the lineal, the Ring Magazine lineal title on the line, and we're going to have one champion decided, which should have happened last July. And very well, we all thought this belonged to an Argentinian fighter, in our opinions.
Agreed.
So based on that, let's look at Saturday. What is your game plan for Jermell Charlo to beat Brian Castano?
He needs to get off. He needs to... He has the power. Based off of the first fight, he had the power.
And based on his resume, because he's knocked out a lot of opponents.
Yes. But I think possibly that power has become intoxicating, and maybe he waits for that big one punch, that showstopper, instead of...
The Canelo effect.
Yes.
Because we just saw it doesn't work.
Yes.
It didn't work.
Yes.
He uses power for every single punch, and he got outboxed.
And not to say that...
And this is just a few days away from the Canelo Dimitri Bivol fight.
Yeah.
And we saw that he got outboxed, and Dimitri Bivol handled his power, and Canelo was going for that slam dunk shot.
But I will say, not to say that Charlo does not throw jabs, because he most certainly out-jabbed Castano.
But he's not his brother. Jermell is a jabbing machine, while Jermell is not. Jermell is power shots from beginning to end and uses his jab every so often, but is not consistent with it. His brother uses a jab to initiate his attacks. Jermell doesn't.
Well, that's the issue, is I didn't see Jermell initiating very much. And to be honest, it seemed like both fighters were hesitant to initiate, because it seemed like both fighters were waiting to capitalize on mistakes. I think that if Jermell can be more aggressive, more assertive, take the fight to Castano, he can be very successful. Because he has the power, he has speed, he moves. His ring generalship is great. He was moving around that whole ring. He was dominating that ring. I will say he was more on the defensive in fight 1, because it seemed like Castano was pressing the action. But he is able to move around that ring effortlessly, and he can throw that jab. He has the speed. He has the angles. if he is more assertive, can get off and initiate the action, I think he can have a lot of success.
Can he get the victory by doing that?
I think he can. Yes.
So Charlo in the lead up has been calling out for a knockout of Castano. How does he get a knockout of Castano?
That's tough. Castano, he has a very interesting. He's a great boxer. You can't knock any of these two fighters.
Castano to me managed to translate his amateur style well into professional.
Yes.
Whereas most people or most fighters tend to abandon the amateur style once they go professional.
Well, I think there's an issue with that also, though. Castano, like I just said, did not throw as many jabs. He kind of led his offense head first. He did this kind of like semi-clamshell. He would throw up a clamshell every once in a while, a la... God, I'm drawing a blank here. Jesus Christ.
What era are you thinking?
A blank here.
It's all right. What era are you thinking about?
Guy that came back to beat Moore for the championship, heavyweight championship.
George Foreman?
George Foreman. Thank you. I am drawing a blank. Jesus Christ.
No worries.
He was throwing up a George Foreman-esque clamshell, like randomly through these rounds. I don't know if you go back and watch the fight.
I know that fight very well. He
literally throws up this clamshell randomly.
That's a very popular fight.
Castano throws up this random clamshell throughout this fight. And every time I saw it, I thought, George Foreman. This is like this weird George Foreman like throwback, but he would abandon it. Obviously, he wouldn't stick to it. But so I think to sum it up, I guess Charlo can win because Castano, to my opinion, was coming in without that jab, without setting up. He was just trying to close the distance. That's all. I feel like that's all that was on his mind, was closing that distance once he was in the pocket, unloading. And it was successful because I feel like Charlo was waiting for that counter shot.
As a matter of fact, it was so successful that based on stats, Brian Castano outlanded Charlo for 8 out of the 12 rounds in the first fight.
In power shots, yes.
That's intense.
In power punches, Castano did, according to comic box numbers, Castano outlanded Charlo in power shots. Yes. Again, Charlo outlanded in jabs, which, the jab is, it's a big deal. I understand it's not a power shot. Anything other than a jab, right, is a power shot. But that is the setup. That is the distance gauger. You can win. There's been many fighters who successfully use that jab as a strategic.
So recap for me. How does Charlo win?
Aggressive. He needs to be more aggressive. He needs more assertiveness. He needs to get off before Castano. He needs to not only keep Castano at his range, because Charlo can successfully, he did it for a lot of this fight. He successfully kept Castano at the end of his jab, and that jab was strong. And he was able to successfully counter Castano, but he needs to not only be able to counter, he needs to not let Castano get him to the ropes and dictate the pace of the fight. He needs to not let Castano get him to the ropes and unload without, consequence. He needs to make Castano work for that. He needs to make Castano work to the ropes. He needs to make Castano work to get inside. He needs to not only counter, but use that power, use that speed, use that ring generalship to create angles, to really make Castano feel that power.
Makes sense. And let's flip the coin. How do you see Castano winning this fight?
Castano knows his game.
Technically, before you start, he did enough already to have beat Charlo.
I think so.
Because you scored it that way, I scored it that way. We're both questioning the score of one judge.
Yes.
And one of the judges who had it a draw, we both agreed with it because it was that close. There were so many swing rounds. Yes. And we didn't disagree with the judge who saw it for Castano. But we disagreed with the guy who had it for Charlo for 6 points over Castano. Can we potentially end up with a draw again on Saturday? Or how does Castano beat Charlo?
I don't think there'll be a draw. I do not think there will be a draw.
You think we'll have a decisive, undisputed champion on Saturday?
Yes. These two fighters are fighters of elite championship caliber. There is no way that these fighters will come into this fight in the same mindset, in the same fitness level, in the same determination. There's no way. These guys, there is going to be a decision. There will be a decisive victor come Saturday. There will be game plans. There will be implemented strategies. There will be implemented work. I mean, you know, the fight happens before you get to the fight. The fight happens when you're training. The fight happens when you're preparing. The fight happens when you're putting in the hours, the time on the road, the time on the rope. There will be a decisive victor Saturday, I believe. For Castano, he did it right the first time. He made that fight a phone booth fight. He worked to get in. He established his momentum. And that may have been because Charlo allowed it. I don't know. I do not know, right? You're not in the mind of these fighters. It may have been because Charlo allowed it, or it may have been because Charlo didn't have an answer to him. But he did it right the first time. I would say if he can work behind a jab a little bit, that would greatly benefit him and hopefully help him avoid walking into some of those counter shots that he walked into in fight one. He came in throwing, heavy shots, hooks, from a distance, and Charlo caught him. Charlo caught him with some counter shots that I'm not going to say are easy because I'm not going to say I can land them, but Charlo can land them, and that's all that matters at the end of the day.
And so going back to Castano, how do you see him getting the victory?
I think he needs to follow the same game plan. He needs to get on the inside because...
You think he follows the same game plan thinking that Charlo hasn't changed much or is not going to change much?
It's tough because I'm not going to say that... I don't know, what can be improved.
The only reason I mention this is because... and I'm sorry for cutting you off. The only reason I ask you this and I mention this is because we saw how Anthony Joshua changed his game plan from fight 1 to fight 2 with Andy Ruiz, right? 1, he wants to exchange, not respecting his opponent. Fight 2, he wants to run around, box, get in, get out, score it, got his titles back.
Yes, but there's a difference, right? I think it could be said that Joshua did not respect Ruiz for his first fight. Absolutely. He didn't respect Ruiz's power, his speed.
Nobody did.
His determination. I think that for this fight it is different because I don't know if Castano can best, right, Charlo at the boxer-puncher game. I don't know if that's possible.
And they both felt each other's power because they were both shaken throughout the fight.
Agreed. I don't know if he can overcome that speed of Charlo, that power of Charlo at a distance. So I can't say, no, he needs to change his game and fight a boxer-puncher's fight. Be on the outside, choose his shots, use his speed, use his angles. Because Charlo's great at that. That is his game. He counterpunches great. He's fast. He has power. I don't know if Castano can best him at that. So for me to say, hey, Castano, change your game. You know, you need to be better on the outside. Or you need to, you know, create angles using your lateral movement. I don't know if he can do that. I know that he was successful using his infighting, and he is good at that, and that is what he likes to do. You know, so I think at this point, double down on that. Add the jab. Work your way in. Be safer. Don't come in swinging wild. Take more advantage of when you can get him on the ropes. Round 1 through round 3, they were a lot of feeling out. It was like a chess match. You could see it unfolding.
Yeah.
You know, it was a lot of like feints and a lot of...
How did you have round 10 through 12 in the closing? And I ask you that because we talked about this point earlier, and I'm going to bring it up here. How did you score it? Round 10 through 12.
I scored 10 through 12 for Charlo.
So did I. And it seemed like, and I'm going to go back to the point that I brought to you earlier, it seemed like Charlo checked out at some point during the fight around round 8. It seemed like he checked out mentally, like he forgot that he was in a boxing fight. And Castano was looking good. And the crowd is cheering. And around round 9, he was still, I don't know if he was dazed from punches, if he was feeling the effect of the Castano attack. But he seemed like he was checked out mentally out of it. And all of a sudden, a switch went off. And he started attacking Castano as if it was a brand new fighter with a brand new set of lungs and a whole new set of action and a new game plan, where he just started pushing forward and all of a sudden landing punches to where we saw in the later rounds that Castano got shook and almost knocked out. Because Charlo came after him and almost knocked him out. What happened? Did he check out? Did he get bored? Did he forget that he was in a fight? Because it's something that's so huge in my mind, and it's been playing such a huge part in my mind. I don't understand what happened with that time lapse. Because all of a sudden it's like, when Charlo wanted to take over the fight, he was able to. And he started doing it, and it was a little bit too late. Because it was close to the end of the fight. Did you end up noticing that or catching on to that?
I didn't feel that Charlo slept on. I don't think he checked out. I think that he fell into a pattern. I don't necessarily think he checked out. I think that, as we said, in previous fights, it has been a worry, right, that Charlo gives rounds away. I don't necessarily think he checked out. And I think that his corner gave him good advice, and he responded well to it. As an elite athlete, he listened to his corner, and he implemented their advice. I actually, took notes here. I even wrote Castano in round 9 was more aggressive. He was. But Charlo defended well. He responded well. He answered the flurries. He did enough, in my mind, to win that round. I think it is just... I mean, if only we could be in the minds of each fighter and feel what they're feeling, think what they're thinking, because I'm sure, fatigue, the stress,
especially after a fight like that, the flow and rhythm of a style of fight like that.
Yes, this fight was a chess match. It was a chess match, which is why we end up with a, quote unquote controversial decision, because this fight was not only fought physically, it was fought mentally, in the styles of boxing, in the styles of fighting, and it's expressed in the way the judges saw it.
I completely agree, and I'm gonna put you on the spot because you know what's coming. We already analyzed the first fight. We're breaking down how each fighter's path to win this fight, this rematch, come Saturday. We're less than 24 hours away. I'm going to put you on the spot. Who wins the undisputed title to 154-pound division?
Oh, gosh. This is...
Is it that close?
It's a tough call. Like, obviously, there's anyone who says there's not a cultural influence into what you want to call fights
bias
is a liar.
Bias?
They are liars.
So, based on the bias, if you saw the last press conference that they had, Charlo said he keeps expressing his nationalism, and he expressed this is absolutely USA versus Argentina. So yes, culturally, you're going to speak on the Latino side of the argument, but Charlo is making the claim of they're coming to take over.
I think Charlo, if he is more aggressive, has the edge. I have Charlo winning.
Knockout or decision?
I think Charlo can win by knockout. If he is aggressive, if he uses his speed, if he's splitting that guard. He split the guard several times. He could have continued doing it. He just had to get off more. He just had to be first to the punch. I think Charlo can win by knockout. Not to say that it will happen, right? Castano is a great fighter. He's got a pedigree. He's not going to go down easily. He's not going to lay down. It is going to take Charlo putting him down. I think Charlo can do it.
So you're calling Charlo victory on Saturday by knockout?
You're killing me.
I don't know. Is that what you just said? I'm just trying to recap.
You're killing me.
What did you just call it?
Oh, you're killing me.
I know you're breaking down the fight, but we gotta make a decision. We gotta hold each other accountable as well.
My gosh, I'll say Charlo victory. We'll call it by knockout. If you're gonna back your horse, you gotta back him all the way. I think Charlo will win by knockout.
You think Charlo wins by knockout? I think
Charlo wins by knockout.
If he doesn't win by knockout, you're pretty much guaranteeing that it's gonna be a Charlo victory. At that, knockout will be the bonus.
Yes.
Okay. I feel, in all sincerity, that the boxing gods, you're laughing. Why are you laughing?
I want to hear what the boxing gods have to say.
I feel that the boxing gods, who are well beyond our knowledge, have taken notice to that crappy scoring card that one Nelson judge had. Therefore, if it becomes a similar fight as we had in fight 1, that one card will be swinging in the other direction, which will be in Castano's direction. And he will win by a random score with 2 very accurate scores or merely accurate scores, and one random card in his direction, giving him the victory, correcting the prior mistake. Because it's a California style.
It is. Yes, it is obviously possible, but I will say, right? There is always, the challenger has to be hungrier than the champion.
I'm being a cynic, right?
Yes.
I'm being very, very, very much of a cynic right now.
The challenger has to be hungrier than the champion, right? Not to say...
And he was.
Yes, not to say, that one is beneath the other. But I think that Castano proved to Charlo, this last fight 1, that he was hungry. And I think Charlo, hopefully, took notice. Hopefully, he took notice. And, will adjust accordingly. And not to say I have a dog in the fight, that I prefer anyone to win over the other. Hopefully the best man wins. The best man will win.
That's what we want.
But I think that...
You feel that Charlo's better than Castano?
I think he is.
Yeah?
I think he is. I think he is the better... Not to say the better boxer. He is the better boxer puncher, I believe. And he also has that power. And if he is more assertive, I think he can win. I do.
Charlo victory for Saturday. I feel that if it goes to the judges, I feel that they're going to be correcting a wrong and therefore creating a trilogy, which will be a moneymaker for Al Heyman and the PBC. That's the cynicism in me. Now, as far as fighters are concerned, yes, I feel that Charlo is the more powerful of the two. I feel that he's the more accurate, the more efficient of the two. But I feel that the aggressiveness has to go to Castano. And the aggressiveness often wins rounds, secures rounds, and may very well secure a victory for him if he maintains the same game plan as he did in fight number 1. I feel that Castano will win this fight. Why? Because Brian Castano stays consistent, while Charlo will be implementing adjustments. Adjustments that may not need to be done, because he fought a great fight in the first fight himself. Castano sticks to his plan, Charlo adds changes, and I see that Castano will win. While Charlo's figuring out changes and trying to implement the changes. If Charlo, all he has to do is just not check out. I honestly feel that he could get the stop of Castano if he sticks to his game plan. He just needs to box. Both of them like to fight inside the center of the ring. Neither of them are effective on the ropes. This is not a styles make fights because they're both aggressive. Neither of them are good on the ropes. Neither of them are good backpedaling. Both of them are good going forward and in the center of the ring. And that's where I see Charlo excelling. The power.
I agree, except for a caveat that we did see Charlo fight well off of the ropes in fight 1. He fought well.
Which round? Do you recall?
Let's see the notes. Let's go to the notes.
Flip those
here.
pages.
Let's go to the notes.
It's okay.
Here.
Because the only reason I ask is because it makes a big difference if it was earlier in the fight or later in the fight. Just in case it doesn't present itself and the fighters are wearing out in the second half of the fight.
So round 4, I made a note that Charlo fought very well.
Which is the onslaught of Castano, right? Round 4.
Yes. And round 4, I did give to Castano. But I asterisked and gave it a too close to call. I could have given it either way, but Charlo fought very well off the ropes. And I made sure to note it because I did not know how to call that round, right? Do you go for sheer aggression or do you go for the more strategic, skilled punches?
Yeah, depends on the judges. Depends on what they're looking for.
So I do think that Charlo fought very well off the ropes.
Did you score that round for Charlo?
I scored it for Castano.
Okay.
Actually. Round 4, I scored for Castano, but again, I asterisked it as a too close to call because I could have given that round to Charlo.
Good.
I thought he did very well off the ropes. I don't think he was overwhelmed. It just depends whether you go for flash or technique.
I agree.
And I think that we did see Charlo fight very well off the ropes. He displayed it several times throughout the fight. He landed several counter punches, including round 2, where he hurt Castano. If I'm recalling that correctly. He split the guard several times based off of that initial counter punch, which put Castano on the defensive. I did not see Castano fight off the ropes a single time that fight that I can recall. He was hurt.
I think he was against the ropes.
He was hurt
quite a bit.
He got stung a couple times.
Yeah.
But he got on that bicycle.
Especially in the later stages of the fight, he was against the ropes.
Yes, but he got on that bicycle.
Yeah.
He was using some good movement. He never was very much pinned against the ropes, as Charlo seemed to have gotten. Man, that whole first round he spent in the corner.
So how do we close this episode? It's going to be an amazing fight.
It's going to be a good fight.
It's going to be an amazing fight. You guys got to tune in. It's one of those fights that is so hard to call. It's one of those fights that the fact that it's that tight and that close a call makes it that much more intriguing for us to be able to want to tune in, and it improves the sport of boxing. It's an honor. It's a privilege to be able to look into fights like this because it pays homage to the days of yesteryear, boxing of yesteryear. With that said, Joe, my brother, thank you for joining me on this episode, for staying up so late to record this episode. I'm going to tell you guys, we are at 2:26 in the morning right now in a balcony recording this episode, which started on a Thursday night, and it is 2:26 in the morning on Friday morning. And here we are, putting this out for you guys. Thank you guys for tuning in. Please relay this to your buddies, your friends, the boxing lovers, the lovers of the fight game. Yes, I will have some episodes up on MMA coming up, especially after that insane card that we just saw last Saturday with Charles Oliveira, Justin Gaethje, Michael Chandler, and Tony Ferguson, Rose, and Sparza. It was an insane card that took place. Yes, I will be touching base on those, but for now, we're focusing on boxing. And Charlo Castano 2 is about to happen in less than 24 hours away. And all titles are on the line. We will have a king of the Super Welterweight, or, depending on your sanctioning body, the junior middleweight division, depending on what they want to call it. One thing's for sure. We broke it down. You guys pick your winner. Feel free to comment. Feel free to email in. Send us your comments. Let us know what you think. I feel like we got a pretty good point, pretty good touch on the way that the fight's gonna play out. Joe, anything else you want to add on?
Subscribe.
Good. Download, subscribe, check us out on Instagram, check us out on Twitter. Comment on Twitter. We're always live during fight nights. and I'm beyond grateful that this was a special episode for me, because I didn't go at it alone on a preview episode or a recap or whatever it is. I'm always alone. This was a special episode in which I had my little brother join me, someone who's very knowledgeable, and you heard him here today in the way that he broke down the event and the massive event that we're about to witness here come Saturday. So I'll leave you guys with that. Thank you guys again. Much love. Thank you for all the support, and I'll talk to you guys all on the next episode. Take care. Good night.